Welcome to today's fourth and final part of our Digital Preservation Services webinar series. This is Courtney Muma, the Digital Preservation Services Manager for TDL. And today I have the pleasure of hosting Sibyl Schaefer of Chronopolis, officially the Chronopolis Program Manager and Digital Preservation Analyst for Research Data Curation at UCSD. I'm just going to have a couple of slides here before I hand over to Sibyl. Our goal is to have about between 5 and 10 minutes at the end for questions. However, feel free to use the chat to drop in questions during any part of Sibyl's talk. And then at the end, we'll make sure to get to all of those questions. And the way we'll do it is I will read the questions from chat. I'll answer anything that I can if there are questions for me, and then Sibyl will also answer anything that you have for her. We should all be very grateful to Sibyl as well. She is on vacation today and doing this for us. So I also want to extend that thanks, and we're very grateful at TDL for that. So thanks again, Sibyl. So just real quick, I just want to reiterate for y'all that these are recorded, including this one today. We have currently the first, which is just me talking about all of our digital preservation services. The second, which is Heather Greer-Klein from DuraSpace. Those are all in our repository, and we have the videos up on YouTube. Today's, of course, Sibyl's, and those will be in our repository and on YouTube as well. And for those of you who joined us last week for the deepen, oh, I'm sorry, it says Chronopolis here. It should say deepen at the bottom. We have rescheduled Mary Molinaro, who is the executive director of the Digital Preservation Network. So next Friday, the 17th at 2 p.m., you can join us, and she will start from the very top again and give us her whole talk, and we'll have time for questions after that as well. So just a quick reminder before I hand over to Sibyl, the way things work at TDL in our digital preservation services is that your member content passes through the Texas Digital Library's own DuraCloud instance into any of 4 digital preservation storage options, 2 of which are commercial through Amazon Web Services, that's S3 and Glacier, and the other 2 are based in the cultural heritage community, and that's Deepen and Chronopolis, which we're going to hear about today. So with that, I am going to enthusiastically stop sharing my screen and hand over to Sibyl.
Okay, thank you, Courtney. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I hope everybody can hear me okay. And I did want to just mention that I'm not actually on vacation. It's just a Veterans Day holiday, so I'm not like on a beach or anything like that somewhere, unfortunately. But let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so I am going to talk about Chronopolis, which is a dark digital preservation storage network that spans multiple institutions and geographic regions. You can see them here on this lovely US map right now. Our partners are the University of California at San Diego, the National Center for Atmospheric Research in TDL, and the University of Maryland Institute for Advanced Computer Studies in Boulder Park. I'm sorry, not Boulder Park, College Park, Maryland. Chronopolis started in, the collaboration behind Chronopolis started in the early 2000s with some discussion between the UCSD university librarian at the time, Brian Schottlander, and the San Diego Supercomputer Center head at the time, Fran Berman. They had some early discussions in the 2000s, and those discussions eventually became grant proposals. I think they applied to the National Science Foundation at first, and then to the Library of Congress in the slate of NDIP grants that were funded in the mid-2000s. And those grants were really to build the digital preservation infrastructure in the United States. The Chronopolis program itself officially launched in 2008. Since that launch in 2008, we've had 3 software migrations. We originally ran the storage resource broker and then migrated to iRUDS and then to the software that we use today, Chronocore, which I'll discuss a little bit more later. Additionally, our initial partners have changed over time. Chronopolis at UCSD was originally housed in the San Diego Supercomputer Center administratively. The servers still are in SDSC, but the administrative home for it now is the UCSD library. We also have added the Texas Digital Library as our first new partner since the initial three, and we're very excited about that. And then lastly, one other additional piece of background information is that we did receive a track audit in 2012. That audit was provided by the Center for Research Libraries, who has been doing audits since the track checklist was originated, and this was before the ISO standard for trusted digital repositories, ISO 16363. So some core principles of Chronopolis are, number one, that it's a dark archive. So there is no access provided to the materials in Chronopolis. And it's actually arranged so that there's no one single person who can access data at all three of the sites. The sites manage the data independently of each other, and it's usually just one system administrator at each site has any access to that data. A minimum of 3 copies must be stored in the network. We are adding nodes, and so TDL is our 4th node, but we only specify that at least 3 copies need to be stored. And that's really so if one becomes corrupted, we have a better idea of which ones are not corrupted. Data there. Oh, I should mention that we are planning to offer the capability to store it in more than 3 nodes. It's just that we specify that a minimum must be stored. We also say that data will be returned to the depositor in exactly the same form as provided. So we really don't do any file format migration. We just take your bits in and store it and promise to return them to you in exactly the way that you gave them to us. And lastly, we don't put any constraints on the type of data that can be deposited, except we do not accept sensitive data like personal identifying information and HIPAA-related data. But we don't have any specific file formats, etc., that you need to deposit. We don't make any specifications like that. So I mentioned our node partners. So we do have a couple different additional partners. And the newest partners are the Texas Digital Library, who just joined the Chronopolis Node Partnership in May, maybe June of this. We're also working with the University of Göttingen in Germany. We're running some test trials with them right now, and the hope is that they will become our first international node. And we also partner with Deepin and DuraCloud. So Chronopolis and we do ingest materials into Deepin from Chronopolis. To do that, we use the DuraCloud service very similarly to how TDL uses DuraCloud. This is a list of all the folks that are involved in Chronopolis in some way or the other. You can see that there's quite a few people spread out across our different nodes. And we do have probably the most at UCSD, which is mainly because UCSD is the administrative and financial home of Chronopolis. Just some numbers for you. Right now, we have 11 different depositors in Chronopolis. There's about 45 unique terabytes, so 45 times 3 is the total number of the data in the system. This is approximate because UCSD deposits a lot of data quarterly, and we remove some of that data after a while. It's just a quarterly deposit of actually all the library data. So that's kind of in flux. We have almost about 2 million files in Chronopolis. In the Deepin node at UCSD, we have 22 depositors right now. about 36 terabytes and close to 3 million files. So one thing that I've been really working on with Chronopolis over the last few years is sustainability of the program, and that's sustainability relating to three specific areas. The application itself, we wanted to make the application as robust as possible so that it requires as little human intervention as possible, except of course when human intervention is needed. And also to make it something that's very for new nodes to spin up. We've been pretty successful with that at Göttingen, doing the test with them and with TDL. And that is actually one of the main reasons why we migrated from the last software piece, that was iRods. It was actually pretty difficult for all of our nodes to run. So migrating to our new platform really helped make it easy for new nodes to join us. Staffing. So staffing is another area that we've really worked on being sustainable. Chronopolis was initially grant funded. Currently, we receive no grant funding. The Chronopolis employees are at UCSD are all staff employees, meaning that we're not necessarily tied to the Chronopolis program in the sense that if it somehow went away, we would still be UCSD employees. So we're like permanently funded, which is a very good thing. And we also fund the developer at the University of Maryland Institute for Advanced Computer Studies, or UMAX. And lastly, we've been working with partner nodes to kind of change the relationship between us and our nodes and make it more reciprocal. So we have a reciprocal relationship with TDL right now, and we're hoping to add new nodes in this fashion. And it basically means that it will cut our expenses and at the other nodes because they'll be providing storage for us and we'll be providing storage back rather than us paying storage at the specific nodes, which was the model in the past. There are three main ways to provide data to Chronopolis and three main kind of constituencies that do so. The first is through DuraCloud. We partner with DuraCloud to really provide kind of a ingest user interface for depositors. So it's I mentioned before that Chronopolis is a dark system. The DuraCloud interface is really how you would get your data into Chronopolis. And we, in late 2016, I believe, started offering this service through DuraCloud itself. And it's pretty much the same type of service as you would get using it through TDL. So it'd be very similar, or if not the same. And I think if you joined Heather Greer-Klein's talk on DuraCloud, you probably got a really good overview of how that works. Second data provider is Deepin. The Chronopolis node at the Deepin Chronopolis node is officially called DuraCloud Vault, and that's because it's a combination of Chronopolis, the DuraCloud user interface I was just talking about, and Deepin. So it's all three of those entities together. And lastly, the third deposit entity that we have is UC San Diego, which is the #1 data depositor into Chronopolis. The library and researchers, so we store a lot of research data. All of that goes directly into Chronopolis, and we actually bypass DuraCloud for that ingest. Some activities that we've been up to over the last 1 to 2 years include adding the DuraCloud Chronopolis service that I just mentioned. Our University of Göttingen partnership started in late last year. The TDL partnership became official this past summer. We've also done some development on it's a feature called Repair. So if there is corrupted data discovered at one of the nodes, it's a means of repairing that data, and that is one of those areas where there is human intervention built into that workflow. As you can imagine, you'd probably want somebody to investigate the issue if data was detected as corrupted at a node. So it's not an automatic process, but there is a mechanism for it in place. We've worked a bit with the National Center for Atmospheric Research on dashboard development. They do a lot of more web-based development for us. We've also lowered the price points for Chronopolis storage. I'm really happy about that. We were able to do that at the beginning of this year. And another huge piece of development that we've done recently is multiple ingest node development. And this specifically was done so that we could ingest data through TDL instead of just UC San Diego. So UC San Diego was the main ingest point, and all data needed to get to UCSD, like physically get to UCSD, before we could ingest it into the system. And you can imagine that's not very efficient for TDL to send us data, and then we ingest it just to send it back to TDL. So we've created the multiple ingest node development specifically so TDL could ingest the data, and then it from there gets sent to the three nodes. I also recently set up a services advisory board. Courtney is TDL's representative on that board, and the purpose of the board is really to review proposed policies and software development specifications to provide feedback and kind of represent depositors' voices in that feedback. So relaying information about common requests and common features from depositors, and also with an eye to ISO 16363 compliance. That is the Trusted Digital Repository compliance. We're not 100% sure we'll be going up for certification again. That will depend on the new UCSD University librarian, which will be hiring within probably 6 to 8 months. That's actually kind of a multi-year long relationship and quite a commitment. And so it would be up to them as to whether they want to make that commitment. In the meantime, we do want to make sure that we are compliant with that standard. A little bit about the software that Chronopolis uses. Instead of having one kind of monolithic middleware system, we've really broken things out into microservices or smaller software pieces. So the main one that we use is Cron Core, and this itself is a group of microservices that the main part of Chronopolis, which is ingesting data, tracking it through the system, and replicating it through the system. At each node, we run a piece of software called ACE. It's called the Audit Control Environment, and that provides ongoing fixity checking. So we know when any data has been altered, and the default fixity checking timeframe that we have right now is, I believe, 45 days. So every 45 days, an audit is run on the data. The dashboard, this is really an administrative tool which provides us a view of data at all of the Chronopolis nodes. I mentioned our DuraCloud user interface before. And then lastly, there is a small piece of software called the Bridge, and that just connects DuraCloud with the DuraCloud user interface with the Cron Core. This is just a schematic diagram of some of those pieces of data that I was just talking about. So data starts with the data owner, gets synced up to DuraCloud, and then is shot over on the right-hand side. This yellow arrow over here is shot over to the Bridge application, which lives either at UCSD or TDL, whichever is the ingesting node. In this particular schematic, TDL is the ingesting node, and you can see that it to TDL storage, which is at TAC, and from there it can go to NCAR UMIX, or actually that should be UCSD instead of Maryland. I just realized that is incorrect. It's likely to probably go to UMEX and UCSD because they are more the different geographic regions. NCAR is closest to TDL, so it's unlikely that we would both use both TDL and NCAR. This is a schematic of the cron core software, and it goes over intake, ingest, and replication. It basically, it's pretty simple. It's just basically the intake services which grab the data and package it. You can see here that two of them are based at UCSD, the DeepIn and the DuraCloud one are. And then there's a DuraCloud one for TDL as well. And all three of those talk to the ingest server at UCSD, which is basically a database and kind of the brain of the Chronopolis system and keeps track of, where all of the data is, if it's been successfully replicated, etc. The ingest server creates what are called replication requests, and each of the different nodes pings the ingest server, I think it's hourly, to see if a new replication request has been created. And if one has, then it will start replicating the data to that node. So in this schematic, I put UCSD and UMEX as the two ones where data will most likely always get replicated because they represent the west and the east regions. And then down at the bottom, it's NCAR and TDL, which are more in the middle of the US. Bit about ACE, the audit control environment. And I really just wanted to mention that it provides fixity checking at each node, so it runs over the data at a specific node, and it does two levels of checking. So it does regular checksum checking, so it checks the SHA-256 values of all of the data, and it also checks what we call token values, and these are created during the ingest process. They're kind of like in a way, you can kind of think of them as a unique value assigned based on checksums, based on the time of the ingest, based on a bunch of different things that happen at a specific time, and a value is allocated to that information. Those and they're called tokens, and those tokens are stored in a publicly accessible server at the University of Maryland. So it's basically another level of data protection. So if somebody tamper checksum in the system, they would also have to change the token. But if the token changes, then it will fail the audit process when that runs and it checks it against the system at UMAX. So it's kind of like a double layer system of protection. It's not just the standard fixity checking. And that is my basic overview of Chronopolis. I've included my email address, which has an extra @ symbol in front of it, and the Chronopolis website as well. And I am ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Sibyl.
Maybe I should share that.
That was awesome. Yeah, if you can keep that slide up for folks, that would be great. So everybody here, if you have any questions, please just drop them in chat. We still have a little over 5 minutes left for question time. You're always welcome to follow up with me as well afterwards if you have any questions about any of this. But we are here for you. So put your question in chat and we'll try to give you the best possible answer. So I will hush now for a second while we wait. Hi, Ray. Thank you for the question about cost. So I was pretty sure somebody would ask about cost on this. So I have a very handy link because if I go into talking about the cost, there are so many elements that it would take me at least 10 minutes. So we have all of the details about the cost of all of the services, including the breakdown of all of the storage at this link that I've just shared in chat for you. Now we have a question from UT Southwestern Medical Center. Curious about HIPAA data. Is that screened out via a user agreement beforehand?
Yes, that actually is in the TDL agreement, I believe, right, Courtney? And I should mention that we have started introductory talks about maybe being able to provide HIPAA and PII compliant storage, but I think that's a little bit of a ways off right now.
Yeah, I think that's true to say for a lot of the digital preservation storage providers right now. As it concerns HIPAA data, everyone knows that it's a real issue that we need to start addressing. And everyone has plans to do it, but we haven't quite gotten to the point where we're creating something yet. Thanks for that question. Another question from Ray. Are there certain large categories that each of the larger repositories are more suitable for? So Sibyl, I'll let you answer for Chronopolis, and then I'll give my answer for Deepin and Amazon.
What was the question again, Courtney? Are there certain large categories that
each of the repositories are more suitable for? So I think what Ray is asking is about kind of what kinds of content might be more suitable for something like Chronopolis, and then what might be more suitable for something like Deepin or the Amazon set of services.
Yeah, okay, I'm understanding it now. And yeah, I think Chronopolis, the ability to, so Chronopolis is a really good place to store things when you're not quite ready to put them in something as long term as Deepin, because it is a year-to-year contract. So you're not agreeing to the full 20 years at once. Yet it's extremely secure, so you also could be very confident that you're not going to lose anything. And I think it's also really great for, say, you get archival collections in that maybe you're not ready to process, and you need to kind of put them in a digital backlog. I think that is one of the use cases that Chronopolis really serves quite well. And then at some point, you do actually, process the data, and maybe when that collection is in its finished state, you would send it off to Deepin for the 20 years. But yeah, I think that would probably be the most applicable use case that I can think of, Chronopolis.
And Sibyl, would you say that you mentioned that that UCSD, for example, is putting large sets of research data in Chronopolis as well? Is that a similar use case to the unprocessed archival materials?
Yes. So we put in, so the researcher data that comes in, we curate a lot of it, meaning that we add a lot of metadata to it and offer access to it through our digital asset management system, or it's called digital collections right now. And everything that goes in digital collections goes into Chronopolis. We also have researchers who have data sets that they have some different means of providing access to, or they work with a federal agency. They give the federal agency the data, and that agency has collates the data across different research entities and provides access in that way. So they already have that mechanism, that access mechanism, and those folks deposit directly into Chronopolis. Locally, we do have an SLA with our researchers for 5 years. So we offer them for 5 years, and the idea is that after the 5 years, that we go back and ask them again if they still feel the data is of value to keep it for an additional 5 years, and keep it moving forward in that fashion.
Thank you so much, Sibyl. I should add too that that's very similar to something that we're looking at doing for our Dataverse implementation for the Texas Data Repository. So that model is going to be very valuable to us as we move forward. And Ray, I also want to answer your question. I think Sibyl sort of answered it about Deepen, that it's that 20-year commitment. And then also with Deepen, there's an agreement that should your institution disappear for whatever reason or become unable to preserve the materials, that the other nodes promise to sustain it at least for that 20-year contract. And then in terms of Amazon services, we offer S3 and Glacier. They are both commercial options. That's about all I have to say about those, is that they're commercial options. Just for whatever reason, if any of our members don't want to use the Deepen or Chronopolis options that we can provide through our DuraCloud interface. And I have updated a lot of information on our digital preservation services website, and I included a grid that describes some major differences between these services. And Ray, I'll put a link to that in the chat here as well. Righty. So any other questions? Got about a minute. No problem, Ray. Okay, with that, I want to give a final thank you to Sibyl, who's not on a beach, but I want you to still enjoy the rest of your day off. Thank you so much for doing this for us, Sibyl. We really appreciate it here at
Yeah,
CDL.
thank you for having me.
All right, everybody, have a good day, and join us next week for Mary's makeup talk for last week's problem with the Deepen discussion. Bye, everybody.